The empty chairs, the stellar assembly hall floated in the void between star systems. A magnificent structure of crystalline spires and quantum-locked chambers. For 3,000 cycles, it had served as the beating heart of galactic civilization. Today, Ambassador Keleth of the Chitara Hive arrived early, as was his custom. His 6 legs clicked rhythmically against the polished floor as he made his way to the grand chamber. Something felt wrong. Keleth's compound eyes scanned the enormous room, taking in hundreds of delegation seats arranged in concentric circles. Each species had their designated area, customized for their unique biology. The Chitara section featured raised platforms and climate controls for his insectoid people. The Venmari occupied floating spheres of contained atmosphere. The Threxian delegation sat in heated stone cradles. Everything appeared normal, except for one glaring absence. The human section stood completely empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of everything. The chairs were gone. The translation equipment had been removed. The small touches that humans always added, their plants and photographs and strange decorative items, had all vanished. Even the nameplates had been carefully unscrewed and taken away. Keleth approached the vacant space, his antennae twitching with confusion. In his 200 cycles of diplomatic service, he had never seen a delegation miss a summit, let alone remove all trace of their presence. He activated his communication implant and sent a query to the human. Embassy district, no response. He tried the human trade stations, the human military outposts, the human scientific installations. Each attempt met with the same result: automated messages stating that the facilities were closed. With no forwarding information provided, other delegates began arriving. High Curator Venmera, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field, drifted into the chamber. Her consciousness touched Keleth's mind with a gentle inquiry. "Why do you emanate such distress, Ambassador Keleth?" "The humans," Keleth replied, gesturing with his foreleg toward the empty section. "They are absent. Completely absent." Venera's energy field pulsed with colors that indicated mild surprise. Nothing more. "Perhaps they are delayed." Human vessels are notorious for their inefficient propulsion systems. They likely encountered some mechanical failure. Commander Threx entered next, his massive reptilian form moving with predatory grace despite his advanced age. Scales the color of burnished copper caught the ambient light as he surveyed the chamber. His golden eyes immediately noticed the human absence. "Good," Threx rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "Perhaps we can conduct actual business without their constant interruptions about fairness and proportional representation." Keleth felt uncomfortable with that assessment, though he could not articulate why. It was true that humans often slowed proceedings with their insistence on ethical considerations. They questioned trade agreements that seemed perfectly logical to other species. They raised concerns about military actions that were clearly justified by standard diplomatic protocols. They complicated simple matters with their emphasis on individual rights and cultural preservation. The summit began, despite the missing delegation. Chancellor Morix, an ancient being whose species predated most galactic civilizations, called the assembly to order. His crystalline voice resonated through the chamber. "We note the absence of the human delegation. As per assembly regulations, we shall proceed with scheduled business. If humanity wishes to rejoin deliberations, they may submit proper requests through established channels." The first matter concerned a mining dispute between the Krell Consortium and the Lithoid Collective. Both sides presented their cases with mathematical precision. The Krell argued that mineral extraction rights belonged to whoever could most efficiently process the resources. The Lithoids countered that geological formations held cultural significance that transcended economic considerations. Under normal circumstances, the human ambassador would have stood at this point. She would have asked questions that seemed irrelevant but somehow led to unexpected solutions. She would have suggested compromises that satisfied needs neither side had explicitly stated. She would have reminded everyone that mining rights affected 17 smaller species whose voices often went unheard in such disputes. Instead, the debate continued for 6 hours, circling the same arguments repeatedly. Both sides became increasingly entrenched in their positions. Finally, Chancellor Morix called for a vote. The Krell won by a narrow margin, and the lithoids withdrew from the chamber in bitter silence. Keleth watched them leave and realized something important had been lost. Though he could not name what it was, the second matter proved even more troublesome. The Venmari Collective proposed restructuring the Assembly's communication network. High Curator Venmara presented detailed specifications, explaining how the new system would operate with greater efficiency and reduced energy consumption. This is a logical improvement, she concluded, her energy field glowing with confidence. The existing network is antiquated and unnecessarily complex. No one disagreed. The vote passed unanimously. It was only after the session ended that Keleth decided to investigate the human absence more thoroughly. He traveled to the Human Embassy District, a collection of modest buildings near the Assembly Hall. What he found made his antennae droop with dawning horror. Every building stood empty, not abandoned in haste, but carefully, deliberately vacated. Doors were locked. Windows were sealed. Interior spaces had been cleaned thoroughly. In the main embassy, Keleth found a single data crystal sitting on the ambassador's desk. He activated it with trembling forelegs. A human woman appeared in holographic form. Keleth recognized her as Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, though he realized with shame that he had never learned much about her beyond her official title. She had served in the Assembly for 20 cycles, speaking passionately about cooperation and mutual understanding. How many of her speeches had he half listened to while reviewing other documents? To the Stellar Assembly, she began, her voice calm and formal. Humanity hereby withdraws from all treaties, agreements, and associations with your civilization, effective immediately. We have closed all embassies, recalled all personnel, and ceased all diplomatic relations. Keleth's heart beat faster. This was unprecedented in Assembly history. This is not a decision made in anger, Ambassador Rodriguez continued. We harbor no ill will toward any species represented in the Assembly. However, we have concluded that our philosophies are fundamentally incompatible with your civilization's direction. The hologram paused, and something sad flickered across the human's face. For 300 years, we have participated in Assembly affairs. We have offered our assistance freely. We maintained the communication networks that connect your worlds because we found purpose in helping others stay connected. We mediated disputes because we believed diverse perspectives could find common ground. We provided medical care across species boundaries because we saw all sentient life as worthy of compassion. In return, you tolerated our presence. You accepted our services while dismissing our values as primitive emotionalism. You benefited from our work while considering it beneath the dignity of more advanced species. You used our solutions while mocking the thinking that produced them. Keleth wanted to protest, but memories flooded back. How many times had he heard colleagues describe humans as useful but unsophisticated? How many Assembly members had joked about human sentimentality? How many decisions had been made with the assumption that humans would handle the difficult, messy work that other species found distasteful? We are leaving your region of space entirely, the ambassador said. We will establish our civilization elsewhere. Perhaps with younger species who still believe that kindness is strength rather than weakness. We will not be monitoring your affairs or returning to assist with future difficulties. You have the knowledge and technology to maintain what we've built. Whether you choose to do so is your decision. We wish you well in whatever future you create. The hologram faded. Leaving Keleth alone in the empty embassy, he rushed back to the assembly hall and presented the message to the full council. The response varied by species. Some expressed relief at humanity's departure. Others showed mild concern about the work humans had been performing. A few, like Keleth, felt deep unease about what this meant. Commander Threx spoke for many when he declared, "This is actually beneficial. Humans were holding us back with their outdated ethics and inefficient methodologies. We are advanced civilizations. We will manage our own affairs with proper sophistication." The Assembly passed a resolution accepting humanity's withdrawal and expressing confidence in their continued prosperity. They assigned various human responsibilities to other delegations, distributing the work according to each species' supposed strengths. The Venmar Collective took over communication network maintenance. The Krell Consortium assumed management of medical databases. The Threxian Empire accepted responsibility for maintaining peace in border regions. Everything was allocated logically and efficiently. As Keleth returned to his quarters that night, he gazed out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were traveling to unknown destinations. They had packed up their entire civilization and left without fanfare or dramatic confrontation. They had simply decided that this relationship no longer served them and walked away with quiet dignity. It was only later that the assembly would understand what that quiet departure truly meant. Keleth activated his personal terminal and began reviewing records of human activities over the past 3 centuries. The files were extensive. Humans had been involved in virtually every aspect of assembly operations, usually in supporting roles that other species considered beneath their notice. One file caught his attention: a human engineer's report about the communication network that the Venmari were now maintaining. The report was filled with notations about improvised solutions, emergency patches, and creative workarounds. The human had written, "The system specs call for components we can't source anymore. The original designers are long dead. I'm holding this together with duct tape and prayers. We really need to rebuild from scratch, but nobody wants to fund that." Keleth felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The communication network that connected thousands of worlds, that enabled the assembly itself to function, was apparently on the verge of failure. And the people who understood how to keep it running had just left. He opened another file, then another. Each one revealed similar situations. Humans maintaining systems that other species had designed, but no longer understood. Humans solving problems that others had created but couldn't fix. Humans doing necessary work that more advanced civilizations considered beneath them. The pattern was clear, and it terrified him. The assembly had not just lost a member species, they had lost the people who actually made their civilization function. And they had celebrated that loss as a victory. Keleth spent the entire night reading files, his unease growing with each document. By morning, he had compiled a report that he knew the assembly would not want to hear. But as a diplomat who had spent 2 centuries believing in the importance of truth, he could not stay silent. The next day's session would be remembered as the moment when the first cracks appeared in the assembly's confidence. Keleth presented his findings, explaining in careful detail exactly how much the humans had actually done for galactic civilization. Most of the delegates dismissed his concerns. After all, they were advanced beings with sophisticated technologies and ancient wisdom. How difficult could it be to maintain systems that primitive humans had managed? They would learn the answer to that question soon enough. High above the assembly hall, in the vast darkness of space, automated systems began counting down to their next scheduled maintenance cycle. Systems that had always been maintained by human technicians, who knew how to coax a few more cycles out of failing components. The countdown continued, indifferent to the assembly's confidence and far away. Growing more distant with each passing moment, human ships carried their civilization toward new horizons. They did not look back. They had learned long ago that some relationships could not be salvaged, no matter how much effort you invested. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do was walk away and let others learn from their own choices. The assembly would have that opportunity soon enough. The Unraveling 3. Months after humanity's departure, High Curator Venmara floated in the central communication hub, her energy field flickering with colors that indicated deep frustration. Around her, technicians from 7 different species worked frantically at control stations, their efforts producing minimal results. "Explain to me again," she said, her telepathic voice carrying an edge that her species rarely displayed. "Why 17% of assembly worlds have lost communication capability?" The lead Venmari technician, a younger energy being named Soleth, pulsed with embarrassment. "High Curator, the network architecture is far more complex than initial assessments indicated. The human maintenance logs reference systems that do not appear in any official documentation. When we attempt to follow standard repair protocols, we encounter cascading failures across multiple nodes. Benmara examined the holographic display showing the communication network. What should have been a clean, logical structure instead resembled an incomprehensible tangle of connections. Red indicators marked failing systems across dozens of sectors. The humans maintained this for 300 years, she said. Surely we can manage basic upkeep. That is the issue, High Curator Soleth replied hesitantly. They were not performing basic upkeep. They were performing constant emergency improvisation. The network should have failed completely 200 years ago. But humans somehow kept it operational through methods that defy standard engineering principles. And Mara felt something she had rarely experienced in her millennium of existence: genuine confusion. Her species prided themselves on logical thinking and systematic approaches to problems. The idea that humans, those emotional and supposedly primitive beings, had been maintaining critical infrastructure through improvisation was deeply unsettling. Then we must redesign the network using proper methodology, she declared. Assemble a team of our finest engineers. We will build a new communication system that operates according to rational principles. Soleth's energy field dimmed. High Curator, that will take approximately 12 cycles to complete. In the meantime, more worlds are losing connectivity each day. Across the galaxy, Dr. Senna of the aviarch species faced a different crisis. Her feathers, normally a brilliant blue, had faded to a dull gray from exhaustion. She stood in the medical center on Threshold Station. Surrounded by patients she could not help, the aviarch were renowned for their medical knowledge within their own species. Dr. Senna had spent a century mastering every aspect of avian physiology. But the patient before her now was not avian. It was a lithoid, a being whose biology combined mineral and organic components in ways that defied her understanding. The crystalline infection is spreading, her assistant reported. We have tried every standard treatment protocol. Nothing works. Dr. Senna examined the patient's charts, her crest feathers drooping with frustration. She knew what she needed: access to the human medical database. For 3 centuries, human doctors had specialized in cross-species medicine. They had discovered that their own biology, being relatively average across multiple parameters, made them uniquely suited to understanding diverse alien physiologies. They had built an extensive database of treatments, constantly updated with new discoveries. Other species had contributed to this database, but humans had maintained and organized it. More importantly, humans had developed the intuitive understanding necessary to apply that knowledge effectively. The database still existed. Dr. Senna could access the files, but understanding them was another matter entirely. She pulled up a treatment protocol for lithoid crystalline infections. The document was written in human medical terminology, which had become the standard for cross-species healthcare. But the human language had quirks that translation software could not fully capture. Words like approximately and usually, and depending on individual response, appeared throughout the text. Dr. Senna's species thought in precise measurements and absolute certainties. This human approach of qualified recommendations and situational adjustments felt impossibly vague. Yet she knew that human doctors had successfully treated thousands of lithoids using these same protocols. Need to consult with a human physician, she said. Finally, her assistant's feathers ruffled with discomfort. Doctor, the humans are gone. We have sent messages to their last known locations, but there have been no responses. Dr. Senna looked at her dying patient and felt the weight of her inadequacy. In the 3 months since humanity's departure, mortality rates for cross-species medical emergencies had increased by 47%. Beings were dying from conditions that human doctors could have treated icily. The lithoid on her examination table began convulsing. Dr. Senna made her best guess at treatment. Following the protocol as literally as she could interpret it, she administered the medication and waited, her heart's pounding with anxiety. The convulsions stopped. For a moment, she dared to hope. Then the patient's crystalline structures began fragmenting, a sign of catastrophic system failure. Within minutes, the lithoid was dead. Dr. Senna stood in silence, staring at the body. This was the 8th patient she had lost this week. 8 beings who would have lived if human doctors were still available. She wanted to scream, to rage against the unfairness of it all. But her species did not express emotion in such ways. Instead, she carefully filed her report and moved on to the next patient. Meanwhile, Engineer Corvus of the Macorian Collective faced a mystery that challenged everything he understood about technology. The Macarians were artificial beings, created by an ancient civilization and now existing as independent entities. Their entire existence revolved around logic, efficiency, and systematic problem-solving. Corvus stood in the power generation facility that supplied energy to the entire industrial sector of Forge World 7. The facility had been designed by Macarian engineers 500 years ago. It was a masterpiece of efficient design. It's capable of providing power to millions of industrial units with minimal waste. It was also failing. Run the diagnostics again. Corvus instructed his team of technicians. The results appeared on holographic displays. All systems operating within normal parameters. No malfunctions detected. No errors in any subsystem. Yet the power output had decreased by 23% over the past month, and industrial production was suffering accordingly. Corvus accessed maintenance logs, searching for clues. The records showed that Macarian technicians had serviced the facility regularly for centuries. Following standard procedures without deviation, everything had functioned perfectly. Then, 312 years ago, something changed. The maintenance logs began including entries from human engineers, not replacing the Macarian staff, but supplementing them. The human entries were frustratingly imprecise. Adjusted flow regulator on reactor 3 was making that weird noise again. It's a realigned distribution grid in sector 7. Don't know why it keeps drifting out of spec, but this should hold for another few months. Replaced pressure valve on coolant system. Yeah, I know it tested with intolerance, but trust me on this one. Corvus felt something approaching anger, though his kind rarely experienced such emotions. These human entries violated every principle of proper engineering documentation. They referenced problems that diagnostics had not detected. They made adjustments based on subjective observations rather than objective measurements. They fixed things that were not broken according to system specifications. Yet when Corvus compared power output over time, he noticed something impossible to dismiss. During the 3 centuries of human involvement, efficiency had actually increased by 8%. The facility had operated beyond its design specifications, producing more power with greater reliability than the original Macorian engineers had thought possible. And now, after just 3 months without human maintenance, performance was declining rapidly. Corvus began investigating other facilities across Macarian space. He found the same pattern everywhere. Factories, power plants, transportation networks, life support systems. All had been quietly supplemented by human engineers. All were now experiencing mysterious failures that diagnostics could not explain. He made a decision that was difficult for a being of pure logic. He would try to replicate human maintenance procedures, even though they made no rational sense in Reactor 3. Corvus listened carefully for the weird noise that the human engineer had mentioned. At first, he detected nothing unusual. Then, after recalibrating his audio sensors to frequencies that Macarians normally ignored, he heard it. A subtle harmonic vibration in the flow regulator. According to specifications, the regulator was functioning perfectly. The vibration fell well within acceptable parameters. Any Macorian technician would have ignored it. But Corvus remembered the human notation and made an adjustment. The vibration stopped. Power output increased by 0.7%. Corvus stood very still, processing this information. The human had detected a problem that should not have existed and fixed it using methods that should not have worked. Somehow, through means that defied logical analysis, the adjustment had improved system performance. This revelation led him to a terrifying conclusion. The Macarian Collective, and probably every other advanced civilization in the assembly, had been depending on human intuition and experience for centuries without realizing it. The humans had not just maintained systems, they had optimized them in ways that purely logical beings could not achieve. Back at the assembly hall, Chancellor Orcs called an emergency session. Delegates arrived to find the Grand Chamber in disarray. Several delegation sections had lost environmental controls due to power distribution failures. The translation systems were malfunctioning, creating bizarre miscommunications between species. Even the gravitational anchors that kept certain species' seating areas stable were fluctuating unpredictably. Commander Threx took his seat in the heated stone cradle, his expression grave. "I have concerning news from the border regions," he announced. "Without human patrol vessels maintaining our treaty boundaries, several aggressive species have begun territorial expansions. The Krelix swarm has claimed 3 star systems that were designated as neutral territory. The Voidborn Collective is raiding commercial vessels in the outer sectors. Deploy our own forces," suggested a delegate from the Crystalline Authority. "We have fleets capable of maintaining order." Threx's golden eyes gleamed with something that might have been bitter amusement. "I attempted that. Our first patrol fleet encountered a Krelix battle group. The confrontation lasted exactly 7 minutes before our ships withdrew." The chamber erupted in shocked chatter. The Threxian Empire was known for its military prowess. The idea that their forces had retreated so quickly was almost incomprehensible. "The issue," Threx continued, "is not one of courage or capability. Our warriors fought valiantly. The problem is that our military doctrine was developed for peacetime operations. For 300 years, humans have handled actual combat situations in the border regions. They maintained peace, not through our sophisticated diplomatic threats, but through their willingness to engage in brutal, direct confrontation." He activated a holographic display showing the engagement. The Threxian ships had approached with standard tactical formations, broadcasting diplomatic warnings according to proper military protocol. The Krelix had responded by attacking immediately with overwhelming force. "Our crews were psychologically unprepared for an enemy that ignored all civilized combat conventions," Threx admitted. "The humans dealt with such species regularly. They understood that some beings only respect superior firepower. They were willing to be ruthless when necessary, a quality we thought was primitive. We now see it was practical." Ambassador Kelleth stood, his antennae trembling. "We must attempt to contact humanity again. This situation is becoming critical across multiple sectors. Communication failures, medical emergencies, infrastructure problems, security breakdowns. These are all things humans handled for us," Chancellor Morick said firmly. "We accepted humanity's withdrawal. We voted to continue without them. We are advanced civilizations with thousands of years of development. We will solve our own problems." But even as he spoke, the lights in the chamber flickered. The environmental controls failed in 3 more delegation sections. And on a distant medical station, another patient died from a condition that human doctors could have treated in minutes. The Assembly's confidence was crumbling, but their pride remained intact. They would not admit they needed help. Not yet. That admission would come, but only after the cost had grown far higher than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Cena worked through another sleepless night, watching more patients die. Engineer Corvus struggled to understand human improvisation, his logical mind straining against intuitive concepts. High Curator Van Mara watched her communication network continue its inexorable collapse. And in the border regions, Commander Threx received reports of new territorial violations, of raiders growing bolder, of the careful peace that humanity had maintained, slowly dissolving into chaos. The Stellar Assembly was learning a painful lesson. Being advanced and being capable were not the same thing. Sophistication without practical skill was just elaborate helplessness. And pride, however, justified by millennia of achievement, was a poor substitute for the humble wisdom to accept help when you needed it. The humans had known this. They had tried to teach it through example. The Assembly had been too proud to learn. Now they were paying the price of that pride, and the bill was still accumulating. The cost of pride 1 year after humanity's departure. Captain Zara, of the Felixian Pride, stood on the bridge of her warship, watching her homeworld burn. Her tail lashed with barely contained rage as enemy bombardment lit up the night side of Felixa Prime like a deadly aurora.
Oh.
How many evacuation ships made it out? She demanded, her feline features set in grim determination. Her first officer, Gresh, consulted the tactical display with trembling paws. 63% of the population evacuated. The rest could not finish the sentence. Zara's claws extended involuntarily. The Krellic swarm had appeared in their system without warning, bypassing defenses that should have detected them weeks in advance. The warning network had failed, another casualty of humanity's absence. By the time Felix Prime realized they were under attack, it was too late. Set course for Threshold Station, Zara ordered. We will join what remains of the assembly fleet. As her ship jumped to hyperspace, she thought about the last time she had seen a human. It had been a diplomatic attach named Marcus Chen, who had served as a liaison between the assembly and the Felixian military. Marcus had been quiet, unassuming, the sort of person who worked diligently in the background without seeking recognition. He had also been the one who maintained the early warning systems for the entire sector. Zara had never known that until now. She had never bothered to ask what he actually did. He had just been another human, performing another thankless task that kept civilization functioning. She wondered if Marcus was still alive, somewhere in whatever distant space humanity had fled to. She wondered if he knew that his warning systems had finally failed, and billions had died as a result. Threshold Station, once a gleaming monument to galactic cooperation, had become a refugee camp. Millions of beings from dozens of species crowded into facilities designed for thousands. The life support systems strained under the load. Failing regularly despite constant emergency repairs, Ambassador Kelleth moved through the crowded corridors, his compound eyes taking in scenes of desperation that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Crystalline beings huddled in darkened corners, their natural luminescence dimmed by malnutrition. Avians roosted in cramped spaces, their wings folded tight against bodies grown thin from rationing. Macharians operated on minimal power, their normally bright optical sensors reduced to faint glows. He found what remained of the Assembly Council in a cargo bay that had been hastily converted into a meeting chamber. Where once hundreds of delegates had gathered in the Grand Hall, now only 17 remained. The rest were dead, missing, or ruling over fragmented territories that no longer acknowledged Assembly authority. Chancellor Orcs looked ancient, his crystalline form showing cracks that would have been shameful in better times. Ambassador Kelleth, he said, his voice lacking its former resonance. Thank you for joining us. We have difficult decisions to make. What decisions remain? Asked Commander Threx, who bore scars from 3 different battles. Our military is scattered. Our territory is carved up by a dozen different aggressors. Our infrastructure is collapsing. We have already made our decision. We made it the day we let the humans leave without protest. High Curator Venmara flickered into the chamber, her energy field dim and unstable. I have completed my analysis of the communication network, she reported. Total system failure will occur within 6 months. We lack both the knowledge and resources to prevent it. Dr. Senna arrived last, her blue feathers now almost white with stress. Medical update, she said softly. Cross-species mortality rates are now 300% above baseline. We are effectively back to treating only our own species. Multi-species stations like this one are experiencing plague-level death rates. Engineering status is similar. Added Engineer Corvus via holographic projection. As the Macharians had abandoned the station weeks ago due to power supply issues, I have cataloged over 10,000 critical systems across assembly space that were maintained by human engineers. 87% have failed or are operating at dangerously reduced capacity. We cannot repair them because we do not understand how humans made them work in the first place. Silence filled the cargo bay. Each representative understood what these reports meant. The Stellar Assembly, a civilization that had endured for 3,000 cycles, was in its final days. There is one option we have not pursued, Kelleth said quietly. We could try contacting humanity again. Not to demand their return, but to ask for help. To admit we were wrong? Pride, Threx rumbled. That is what you are asking us to surrender. The pride of advanced civilizations that believed ourselves superior to those primitive humans. Yes, Kelleth replied simply. That is exactly what I am asking, because pride is killing us. The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Some argued that humanity would not respond, that they had made their choice and would not change it. Others insisted that accepting help would be admitting weakness to all the predatory species that now circled their dying civilization. Finally, Chancellor Orcs spoke. I am 3,200 cycles old. I have served the Assembly for most of that time. I have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth of new species into the galactic community, and the death of others who could not adapt. He paused, and something in his crystalline structure seemed to shift. I have also been a fool. We all have. We believed that being ancient made us wise, that being technologically advanced made us superior, that our sophisticated cultures placed us above those who thought differently than we did. The humans tried to tell us in 1,000 different ways that these beliefs were wrong. They showed us through their actions that wisdom comes from humility, that advancement means little without practical application, and that sophistication is worthless if it blinds you to truth. But we did not listen. We did not learn. And now we are paying the price of that failure. Orcs looked around at the assembled representatives. I vote that we compose a message to humanity, not demanding their return, not claiming any right to their assistance, but simply acknowledging the truth. We were wrong. They were valuable beyond measure, and we are sorry. The vote was unanimous. Professor Think Deep, the ancient scholar who had discovered the human navigation beacon months ago, was given the task of composing the message. He worked on it for 3 days, writing and rewriting, trying to find words that could convey the depth of their mistake. The final message was simple: to humanity. From what remains of the Stellar Assembly, we write to you not as the proud civilization you once knew, but as survivors learning hard lessons from our failures. When you left, we celebrated. We believed ourselves better off without your primitive methods and emotional reasoning. We thought our advanced wisdom would icily replace your contributions. We were catastrophically wrong. You were not our servants or our inferiors. You were the foundation upon which our entire civilization rested. You maintained our infrastructure, protected our borders, healed our sick, and mediated our disputes. You did the necessary work that we considered beneath our dignity. You possessed practical wisdom that our theoretical knowledge could never match. We do not ask you to return. We have no right to make such a request after how we treated you. But we wanted you to know that we understand now. We understand what you gave us, what you endured from us, and why you chose to leave. If there is any wisdom you can share with us, any guidance you can offer as we try to rebuild from the ruins of our pride, we'd receive it with the gratitude we should have shown all along. We are sorry. Those words are inadequate, but they are sincere. We are truly, deeply sorry. The message was transmitted using their most powerful remaining communication arrays, BROADCAST, toward the region where Professor Think Deep had detected the human beacon. Then they waited. Days passed with no response. Then weeks. Some began to lose hope, believing the humans had cut all ties permanently. Others suggested that perhaps humanity had not survived their exodus, that some disaster had befallen them in unknown space. Then, 37 days after the transmission, a response arrived. The Assembly Council gathered once more in their cargo bay meeting chamber. The holographic display activated, showing a human woman that Keleth recognized. Admiral Sarah Chen, who had served as humanity's military liaison to the Assembly before the departure. She looked older now, her hair grayer, but her eyes held the same sharp intelligence he remembered. To the Stellar Assembly, she began, her voice neutral. Your message was received and discussed extensively within the Human Coalition Council. I have been authorized to respond on behalf of our people. Keleth felt his heart racing. This was it. Either humanity would offer assistance, or they would formally decline and sever all connection forever. First, let me address your apology, Admiral Chen continued. It is accepted. Not because what you did was acceptable, but because we understand that growth requires acknowledging mistakes. Your message shows growth. Faint hope flickered in Keleth's chest. However, the Admiral's expression hardened. Accepting your apology does not mean we will return to our previous relationship. We will not be coming back to rebuild your civilization. That is not cruelty speaking. It is a necessity. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When we left your space, we did so because we realized we had been enabling your worst tendencies. By handling all the difficult work, all the ugly necessities, all the practical problems, we prevented you from developing the skills to handle them yourselves. We made you dependent on us, and that dependency made you weak. You call yourselves advanced civilizations, and in many ways you are. Your theoretical knowledge surpasses ours in numerous fields. Your cultures have depths we are still learning to appreciate. But advancement means nothing if you cannot apply it to survive real challenges. Admiral Chen's image shifted, showing scenes of human colonies in a distant galaxy. We have found new homes here, working alongside younger species who are still learning what it means to build interstellar civilizations. We teach them what we know, but we also insist that they do the hard work themselves. We will not allow them to become dependent on us the way you did. This is the wisdom we can offer you. Survival requires more than knowledge. It requires the willingness to get your hands dirty, to do unpleasant work, to make difficult compromises. It requires humility to learn from those you consider inferior. It requires courage to face problems directly instead of delegating them to others. You have the capacity to rebuild your civilization. Your species are intelligent and resourceful, but you must be willing to change how you think about yourselves and others. You must learn to value practical skill as much as theoretical knowledge. You must stop believing that some work is beneath your dignity. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. We will not abandon you completely. I am authorized to provide you with basic technical documentation that may help you maintain critical systems. We will also establish a diplomatic channel for emergency communications. But we will not be returning to solve your problems for you. You must save yourselves. That is the only way you will learn what you need to survive. The transmission continued with Admiral Ju providing access codes for technical databases and emergency contact protocols. Then she delivered her final message. One more thing you should know. When we left, it was not just because you treated us poorly. It was because we saw where your civilization was heading, and we chose not to be part of it. You were developing a society where advancement meant specialization taken to such extremes that no one understood. How systems worked outside their narrow expertise. Where sophistication meant creating unnecessarily complex solutions that looked impressive but functioned poorly. Where being civilized meant avoiding anything unpleasant or difficult, regardless of necessity. That kind of civilization cannot survive in a universe that does not care about your sophistication. The galaxy is full of species that value strength over elegance, practicality over theory, and results over process. If you want to survive among them, you must learn to value those things too without losing the knowledge and culture that make you who you are. This is your opportunity to build something better. A civilization that combines theoretical advancement with practical capability. That values both sophisticated thought and dirty work. That recognizes wisdom comes in many forms. I hope you succeed. We truly do. But success is something you must earn, not something anyone can give you. The transmission ended, leaving the council in silence. Chancellor Orcs was the first to speak. She is right, he said quietly. About all of it. We must change or die. The choice is ours. Over the following months, that choice played out across what remained of assembly space. Some species could not adapt. They clung to old beliefs about sophistication and advancement, and they perished. Others began the painful process of learning to value different kinds of knowledge. Dr. Sina spent 6 months studying the human medical databases. Not just reading the procedures, but trying to understand the intuitive thinking behind them. She learned to see medicine not as a precise science, but as an art that required judgment, experience, and willingness to take calculated risks. Slowly, mortality rates began to decline. Engineer Corvus taught his fellow Macarians to listen for problems that diagnostics could not detect, to trust observations that could not be quantified, to fix things that were not broken according to specifications, but were clearly not working correctly. It violated everything their species believed about logic. But it worked. Commander Threx began training his warriors not just in sophisticated tactical theory, but in brutal, direct combat. He taught them that sometimes the most effective solution was not the most elegant one. That sometimes you had to be willing to be ruthless to protect what mattered. Hi, Curator. Amara made perhaps the most difficult change of all. She began consulting with species she had previously considered less advanced, asking them how they solved practical problems. She learned that sometimes elegant, theoretical solutions were less effective than crude methods that actually worked in practice. The stellar assembly did not die, but it changed fundamentally and permanently. The survivors built a new civilization, one that valued both theoretical knowledge and practical skill, both sophisticated culture and necessary brutality, both advancement and humility. They taught their children about the humans, not as primitives who had served them, but as teachers they had been too proud to learn from. The stories became legends, and the legends became lessons about the cost of pride and the value of wisdom. And sometimes, when ships traveled through the deep space between galaxies, they detected faint human signals from that distant region where humanity had built their new homes. The assembly never tried to follow those signals. That had been humanity's final instruction: do not follow. Instead, they worked to become worthy of respect from those who might someday return. To build a civilization that humans might choose to rejoin, not out of obligation or dependence, but because it offered something worth participating in. Ambassador Kelleth lived to see the early stages of this transformation. In his final days, he recorded a message for future generations. We learned that being advanced means more than accumulating knowledge. It means having the wisdom to apply that knowledge effectively, the humility to learn from anyone who has something to teach, the courage to do necessary work, regardless of whether it seems sophisticated, the strength to survive without depending on others to protect us from harsh realities. These lessons cost us dearly. Billions died because we were too proud to learn them sooner. Let their sacrifice ensure that future generations never forget. Sophistication without practical capability is just elaborate weakness. Pride without wisdom is just ignorance in fancy dress. In any civilization that believes itself to advance to learn from others is already in decline. The humans taught us these lessons by leaving us. They were perhaps the kindest teachers we ever had, even in their departure, especially in their departure. The recording ended. Somewhere in distant space, human ships continued their journey among the stars. They had found new homes, new friends, new purposes. They rarely thought about the civilization they had left behind, but sometimes, when diplomatic reports mentioned that the old stellar assembly was slowly rebuilding, that they were learning to survive on their own, that they were teaching their children about the importance of humility and practical wisdom, the humans would smile. Not because they wanted gratitude or recognition, but because they understood that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength, even if that gift looks like walking away.